Toddler fell into the icy lake. What this mother bear did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The first light of dawn stretched across the frozen landscape of Pine Hollow, painting the snow-covered trees in hues of soft pink and gold. Lily Morgan stood at the window of her family's cabin, clutching a steaming mug of coffee between her cold hands. Outside, the lake glittered like a sheet of glass beneath the rising sun. 3 months of bitter winter had transformed the once rippling waters into a solid expanse that local children used as a playground when temperatures allowed. "Jacob," she called to her husband, who was stoking the fire in the stone hearth. "Do you think the ice is still thick enough for the village gathering tomorrow?" Jacob Bennett looked up, his weathered face creased with concern. "The rangers said we've had a few warmer days, might be getting thin near the edges." He paused, adding another log to the flames. "I should probably check it before everyone arrives." Their conversation was interrupted by a small voice calling from the next room. "Mommy, look what I made!" 3-year-old Avery came running into the living room, her chubby hands clutching a drawing covered in colorful scribbles. Lily bent down, setting her mug on the nearby table. "Wow, sweetie, is that our cabin?" She pointed to a brown square surrounded by blue and white shapes. Avery nodded enthusiastically, her copper curls bouncing around her rosy cheeks. "And that's the lake, and those are the trees, and that," she pointed to a brown blob with 4 legs, "that's the big animal I saw yesterday." Jacob and Lily exchanged quick glances. "What animal, honey?" Jacob asked, moving closer to examine the drawing. "The big, fuzzy one near the trees. It had a baby with it." Avery's innocent eyes widened as she described her sighting. Lily felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the winter air seeping through the cabin walls. "Where did you see this animal, Avery?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "From my window when I woke up yesterday." They were eating something by the big rocks. Avery returned to her drawing, adding more blue scribbles to what appeared to be the lake. Jacob moved to the window, scanning the tree line at the edge of their property. "Bears," he whispered to Lily when Avery wasn't listening. "Must be a mother and cub. Strange they're not hibernating properly. The ranger mentioned food's been scarce this year." "Should we be worried?" Lily asked, instinctively moving closer to Avery. Jacob shook his head slightly. "They usually avoid humans. I'll let Michael know when he comes by later. He's been tracking wildlife movements for the Park Service." The morning progressed with comfortable routine. Jacob headed out to the shed to repair some equipment, while Lily began preparations for lunch. Avery sat at the kitchen table, happily occupied with her crayons and paper. The cabin filled with the aroma of vegetable soup simmering on the stove, mingling with the scent of pine from the crackling fire. "Can I play outside, Mommy?" Avery asked, looking longingly through the window at the pristine snow. "Not right now, sweetie. Daddy needs to clear a safe path first," Lily answered, stirring the soup. "And remember what we said about the ice? It's not safe to go near it without grown-ups." Avery nodded solemnly, but her eyes remained fixed on the glistening expanse beyond their yard. The sunlight had intensified, making the snow sparkle like millions of tiny diamonds. To a child's eyes, it was a magical kingdom waiting to be explored. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Michael Hayes, their neighbor, and the local wildlife ranger. His tall frame filled the doorway as Lily welcomed him in, stamping snow from his boots. "Morning, Lily. Jacob around?" he asked, accepting the offered cup of coffee with a grateful nod. "He's in the shed. Everything okay?" Lily noticed the concerned expression on Michael's usually cheerful face. Michael lowered his voice, glancing at Avery, who was still absorbed in her drawing. "We've had reports of a mother bear and cub in the area. Usually, they'd be denning up this time of year, but something's disturbed their hibernation cycle. Avery mentioned seeing them yesterday morning," Lily confirmed, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. Michael nodded grimly. "That's what worries me. They're too comfortable being this close to the cabins. Food must be really scarce." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "I'm advising everyone to keep a close eye on their little ones. No wandering outside alone until we make sure the bears have moved on." The conversation shifted as Jacob entered from the back door, bringing with him a gust of cold air. The men discussed plans for the upcoming village gathering, with Michael suggesting they move it further from the lake edge, away from the woods where the bears had been spotted. During their discussion, no one noticed Avery quietly sliding from her chair. She had spotted something glistening on the lake's surface, something that caught the sunlight and sent rainbow reflections dancing across the snow. Her curious mind couldn't resist the pull of such a fascinating discovery. While the adults were engrossed in conversation, she slipped on her little red boots by the door, carefully unlatched it, and stepped out into the winter wonderland. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but Avery was too enchanted by the glittering object on the ice to notice. With determined steps, she trudged through the snow, following the path her father had cleared earlier that morning. The object seemed to be calling to her, its sparkle hypnotic against the white background. "Pretty," she whispered to herself as she reached the edge of the lake. Without hesitation, Avery stepped onto the ice, her little boots making soft crunching sounds. The shiny object wasn't far, just a few more steps. Inside the cabin, the conversation continued until Lily glanced toward the table and felt her heart stop. "Avery?" she called, scanning the room. "Jacob, where's Avery?" The three adults exchanged panicked looks before Jacob noticed the partially open door. "The door," he started, but his words were cut short by a sound that would haunt them forever. A crack, sharp and distinct, followed by a splash and a terrified cry. In the frozen silence that followed, time seemed to stop. Then, simultaneously, all three adults rushed toward the door, their faces twisted with fear of what they might find. Meanwhile, in the woods near the lake's edge, a large brown figure raised her head, ears twitching at the unmistakable sound of ice giving way. The mother bear, with her cub close behind, turned toward the lake, her powerful nose catching the scent of fear on the wind. Something was wrong, and despite everything her instincts told her about avoiding humans, the mother bear felt another, stronger pull, one that every mother, regardless of species, would recognize. A child was in danger. With a soft grunt to her cub to stay put, the massive creature began moving toward the lake, her paws making almost no sound in the fresh snow. The cry that had pierced the morning air awakened something primal in her, something that transcended the natural boundaries between predator and prey, between wild and tame. As Jacob, Lily, and Michael burst out of the cabin door, they were unaware that they weren't the only ones responding to Avery's cry for help. Across the lake, hidden by the trees, a mother's instinct had been triggered in a most unexpected savior. The race to save a little girl had begun, and the odds were stacked against her in the freezing waters of Pine Hollow Lake. "Avery!" Lily's scream tore through the crisp morning air as she spotted her daughter's tiny red form in the middle of the lake. A dark hole had opened in the ice where Avery had been standing just moments before. Only her small hands were visible, desperately clutching at the jagged edge of the ice. Jacob sprinted ahead, his boots pounding against the packed snow. "Stay back!" he shouted to Lily. "The ice won't hold all of us." His mind raced through emergency procedures, He needed rope, a ladder, anything to extend his reach without venturing onto the weakened ice. Michael pulled his radio from his belt. "This is Ranger Hayes. Emergency at Pine Hollow Lake, East Shore. Child in water, ice break. Need immediate assistance." His normally calm voice cracked with urgency as he relayed their location. Lily stood frozen, her hands pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "She can't swim," she whispered the words barely audible. "Jacob, she can't swim." Jacob had reached the edge of the lake now, testing the ice with one foot. It creaked ominously under even that slight pressure. "Avery, honey, try to hold still. Daddy's coming to get you." His voice carried across the distance, but the little girl's cries were growing weaker as the icy water sapped her strength. On the opposite shore, concealed by a copse of snow-laden pines, the mother bear watched the unfolding drama. Her cub whimpered beside her, sensing his mother's tension. With a gentle nudge, she urged her young one to remain under the cover of the trees. Then, with determined purpose, she began moving along the shoreline, seeking a path onto the ice. The bear's massive paws tested each step carefully, distributing her considerable weight with an instinctive understanding of the ice's fragility. Unlike the humans, she didn't rush directly toward the drowning child. Instead, she followed a circuitous route where the ice seemed thicker, occasionally pausing to listen to the creaks and groans beneath her. Meanwhile, Jacob had returned to the shore and was frantically scanning for anything useful. "Michael, the fishing gear in the shed. There's rope." Michael nodded and sprinted back toward the cabin, nearly colliding with Connor Adams, their nearest neighbor who had heard the commotion from his property down the shore. "What's happened?" Connor asked, his face paling as he spotted the situation on the lake. "Avery fell through. Get the rope from my shed. Hurry!" Jacob shouted, already stripping off his heavy coat. If rope wouldn't reach, he'd have to go in after her. Connor disappeared toward the shed while Michael continued calling for emergency services, frustration mounting as he struggled to get reception in the remote area. Lily had moved closer to the lake's edge, her voice hoarse from calling her daughter's name. "She's going under, Jacob. She can't hold on much longer." Jacob was now on his stomach at the edge of the ice, trying to distribute his weight as he inched forward. The ice protested with each movement, hairline cracks spreading like spider webs beneath him. "I need to go farther out," he muttered, measuring the distance with his eyes. At least 15 feet of dangerous ice separated him from his daughter. Too far to reach safely, but what choice did he have? A new sound interrupted the crisis, a deep, rumbling growl from across the lake. Lily turned, her breath catching in her throat as she spotted the massive brown figure moving deliberately across the ice toward Avery. "Bear!" Connor shouted, returning with the coil of rope. "There's a bear on the ice." Jacob looked up, his face contorting with fresh horror. No. In that moment, he faced an impossible situation, his daughter drowning and a predator approaching her. Michael grabbed his rifle from his truck, raising it to his shoulder. "I have a shot," he said grimly, "but I'm not sure I can take it without risking Avery." "Wait." An unexpected voice joined the scene. Savannah Reed, a wildlife biologist who had been collecting samples along the lake shore, was running toward them, her research equipment abandoned behind her. "Don't shoot, look at how it's moving." All eyes turned back to the bear, whose movements were indeed strange for a predator. She was moving with deliberate care, testing each step before committing her weight, steadily making her way toward the hole in the ice where Avery's strength was visibly fading. "She's not hunting," Savannah insisted, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I've studied these bears for years. Something else is happening here." Jacob's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. "I don't care what it's doing. My daughter's dying out there." He started forward again, but Connor held him back. "You'll break through too," Connor warned. "The rope isn't long enough and the ice won't hold you." A strangled sob escaped Lily's throat as Avery's head disappeared beneath the water, her small hands slipping from view. "No!" she screamed, lurching forward only to be caught by Michael. Then time seemed to slow down. The mother bear had reached the edge of the hole, her massive head lowering toward the dark water. Without hesitation, she plunged her upper body into the lake, causing gasps of horror from the watching humans. But what happened next would become the stuff of local legend for generations to come. The bear's head re-emerged from the water, with the collar of Avery's red snowsuit clamped gently between her teeth. With remarkable care, the enormous predator lifted the limp child from the freezing lake. "My God," whispered Michael, lowering his rifle. The bear didn't immediately pull Avery to shore. Instead, she placed the child flat on the ice beside the hole, then used her broad paw to push the small body away from the dangerous opening. Once Avery was a safer distance from the hole, the bear began nudging her repeatedly, rolling her onto her side. "She's trying to get the water out," Savannah said in disbelief, just like she would with her cub. As if summoned by her words, a small shape darted out from the trees. The bear cub, ignoring its mother's earlier command to stay hidden. It bounded awkwardly across the safer ice near the shore, yipping anxiously. The mother bear raised her head, growling a warning to her cub to stay back. Then she returned her attention to Avery, nudging the child with her snout. To everyone's astonishment, water spurted from Avery's mouth, followed by a weak cough. "She's alive!" Lily cried, a renewed hope surging through her voice. Savannah was already moving, pulling off her heavy winter coat as she calculated the safest approach. "I need to get to her while the bear is still helping. Once Avery starts moving more, the bear might become unpredictable." "It's too dangerous," Michael argued, but Savannah was already venturing onto the ice, moving slowly along the path the bear had taken. "Trust me," she called back. "I'm following the bear's weight distribution. If it held her, it'll hold me." Jacob and Lily watched in terrified fascination as Savannah made her careful way toward their daughter and the massive predator that had, inexplicably, become her rescuer. The mother bear was still hovering over Avery, occasionally prodding her with a gentle paw or snout, but her attention was increasingly divided between the child and the approaching human. A low, warning growl rumbled from the bear's throat as Savannah drew closer. "Hey there, Mama," Savannah called softly, using the calm voice she'd developed through years of fieldwork. "That's not your cub, but you knew that, didn't you? You're helping anyway." The bear's small eyes fixed on Savannah, intelligence and wariness evident in her gaze. She placed one protective paw near Avery's still form. Meanwhile, on shore, something caught Connor's attention. Movement in the trees on the far side of the lake. "Someone else is out there," he said, pointing. Jacob squinted against the glare of sun on snow. A figure was making its way along the opposite shore, too far to identify clearly. "Trapper," Michael said grimly, raising his binoculars. "Ethan Marshall. He's been after that bear all winter." He turned to Jacob. "He's got a rifle." A new fear gripped the already tense group. If Ethan spotted the bear near what appeared to be a prone child, he would shoot without hesitation or understanding. "We need to warn him off," Jacob said urgently. Michael raised his arms, waving vigorously, trying to catch Ethan's attention. "Hold your fire," he shouted across the lake, his voice echoing against the surrounding hills. "Do not shoot." but the distance was too great, the wind carrying his words away. Through the binoculars, they could see Ethan spot the scene on the ice, raise his rifle and drop to one knee, taking aim. "No!" Lily screamed, helplessly watching the scene unfold. If the trapper shot the bear, Avery would still be stranded on the ice, and they might lose their only chance at saving her. The shot never came. Instead, the bear's cub, which had been creeping closer despite its mother's warnings, suddenly darted across the ice toward Avery and its mother, directly into what would have been Ethan's line of fire. The trapper hesitated, clearly unwilling to risk hitting the valuable cub. Using the distraction, Savannah had managed to close most of the distance to Avery. She was now only about 10 feet away, close enough to see that the little girl was breathing. Shallow, ragged breaths, but breathing nonetheless. "Good mama," Savannah continued, speaking to the bear, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You did good. She's alive because of you. But she needs human help now." To everyone's amazement, the mother bear backed away slightly, though she remained protectively close. The cub had reached them now, sniffing curiously at Avery's still form. "That's it," Savannah encouraged, inching forward. "Just like that." Suddenly, a sharp crack rang out from the far shore. Ethan had fired a warning shot into the air, trying to scare the bears away from what he perceived as a potential victim. The mother bear reared up on her hind legs, a roar of anger and fear tearing from her throat. The cub squealed and retreated several feet. In that moment of chaos, the ice beneath them, already weakened by the earlier break and now stressed by multiple weights, began to fracture again. Savannah lunged forward, grabbing Avery and rolling to one side just as a new hole opened where they had been. The mother bear and her cub scrambled in the opposite direction, the adult bear's massive weight causing more spiderweb cracks to spread across the ice's surface. "Run!" Jacob shouted from the shore, seeing the entire center section of the lake becoming unstable. "Get off the ice now!" Clutching Avery to her chest, Savannah began a desperate crawl toward shore, distributing her weight as best she could while moving as quickly as possible. Behind her, the mother bear was pushing her cub ahead of her, both animals sensing the danger beneath their feet. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Ethan had worked his way around the shore, and was now attempting to drive the bears away from what he still believed was an attack in progress. The bullet struck the ice near the mother bear, sending splinters flying. The bear roared again, this time in pain as ice shards cut into her face. She reared up once more, and the ice finally gave way beneath her massive weight. With a tremendous crash, the mother bear plunged into the freezing water, her powerful front paws scrabbling at the edge of the ice. The cub wailed in distress, circling the new hole, refusing to leave its mother despite the danger. "Help her!" Lily cried out, surprising everyone including herself. "After what she did for Avery, we can't let her drown." Jacob stared at his wife in disbelief for only a moment before turning to Connor. "The rope, quickly!" Savannah had reached the shore, carefully handing the still unconscious Avery to her parents. "She's hypothermic," she gasped, her own limbs trembling from cold and exertion. "She needs warmth and medical attention immediately." Michael had already laid out emergency blankets from his ranger kit, and Lily cradled her daughter, wrapping her tightly while Jacob checked her breathing and pulse. "She's alive," Jacob confirmed, tears of relief streaming down his weather-beaten face. "Thank God she's alive." But the drama on the ice wasn't over. The mother bear was struggling to pull herself out, the edges of the hole continuing to break away under her claws. Her cub's distressed cries tore at the hearts of all present, a sound of fear and desperation that needed no translation across species. "We have to do something," Connor said, holding the rope uncertainly. Michael shook his head. "It's too dangerous. That's an adult brown bear. If we pull her out, she could attack in panic or confusion." "She didn't attack Avery," Lily pointed out, not looking up from her daughter's pale face. "She saved her." Savannah, though exhausted, was already formulating a plan. "We don't need to pull her out. We just need to give her something to grip onto. Bears are incredibly strong swimmers, but she can't break the ice with her weight distributed in the water." Jacob stood, decision made. "I'll help. Connor, Michael, spread out along the shore with the rope. If things go wrong, pull us back quickly." He kissed Avery's forehead and then Lily's cheek. "I owe that bear my daughter's life." Before anyone could argue further, another figure appeared, jogging along the shoreline toward them. Ethan Marshall, the trapper, had finally realized what was happening and had abandoned his rifle in favor of a long wooden pole used for checking ice thickness. "Use this," he called, his face ashen as he took in the scene. The rescued child, the drowning bear, the frightened cub. I didn't understand. I thought the bear was attacking. Jacob grabbed the pole, nodding to Ethan in grim acknowledgement. Now wasn't the time for blame or explanations. "Tie the rope around your waist," Michael instructed, helping Jacob secure it. "And stay on your stomach. Distribute your weight." With Savannah providing guidance on approaching the bear, Jacob began his careful journey across the ice, pushing the long pole ahead of him. The mother bear was weakening visibly, her struggles becoming less forceful as the cold water sapped her strength. "She won't last much longer," Savannah warned, watching anxiously from shore. "The cub is the priority in wildlife rescue, but this isn't just any bear," Lily finished for her, still cradling Avery. "This mother saved my child." Jacob had reached as close as he dared to the hole. The cub growled at him, torn between fear of humans and concern for its mother. "Back, little one," Jacob murmured, using the same tone he'd used to calm a frightened dog. "I'm trying to help." With extreme caution, he extended the pole toward the struggling bear. "Hey there, Mama Bear," he called softly. "Grab on. Like you helped my little girl, I'm going to help you." The bear's eyes, dark, intelligent, and fading, locked onto Jacob's. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, human and bear regarded each other across the divide of species. Then, with a deliberate movement that stunned everyone watching, the bear reached out a massive paw and gripped the pole. "Pull yourself up," Jacob encouraged, bracing the pole against the ice. "That's it. You can do it." Incredibly, the bear seemed to understand. With the last of her strength, she pulled herself partially onto the ice edge. The ice cracked but held as she gained enough purchase to heave her massive body out of the water. For one heart-stopping moment, the bear stood on all fours just feet from Jacob, water streaming from her fur. The cub rushed to her side, pressing against her leg. Jacob remained motionless, the pole still extended between them like a bridge between worlds. The mother bear shook herself, ice water spraying in all directions. Then she turned toward the shore, toward where Lily sat with Avery, and rose briefly onto her hind legs, her gaze fixed on the child she had saved. A collective breath was held by all humans present. Then, with a soft chuff to her cub, the bear dropped back to all fours and began making her way toward the far shore, her movements sluggish from cold and exertion. "Let's get back," Jacob said, slowly retreating toward his family, and someone call for medical help for Avery. As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens could be heard approaching through the forest. The emergency services Michael had called earlier were finally arriving. In the commotion that followed, paramedics examining Avery, police taking statements, curious neighbors gathering at the news that spread like wildfire through the small community, few noticed the mother bear and her cub disappearing into the shelter of the dense forest on the far side of the lake. But Lily noticed. As the paramedics prepared to transport her daughter to the hospital, she stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes fixed on the point where the bears had vanished. "Thank you," she whispered into the winter air, words meant for ears that would never hear them, but a sentiment that filled her heart to bursting. The bears were gone, yet something profound remained, a connection forged in crisis, a reminder that compassion could transcend the boundaries humans so often placed between themselves and the wild world around them. As she turned to join her family in the ambulance, Lily caught sight of something glinting on the lake's surface, the mysterious object that had lured Avery onto the ice in the first place. Even from this distance, she could now see what it was. A small, heart-shaped locket, probably lost by a skater or visitor to the lake. A heart on the ice that had nearly cost one life, but had revealed the unexpected heart of another. Lily smiled through her tears, thinking how strange and beautiful and terrifying life could be in the space of a single morning. In the ambulance, Avery stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. "Bear," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Big, gentle bear." Jacob and Lily exchanged looks of wonder. How much would their daughter remember of this day? Would she recall the massive creature that had pulled her from the freezing water, or would the memory fade like so many early childhood experiences? Either way, they would tell her the story, the true story, of how a mother's love crossed the boundaries of species on a winter morning beside a frozen lake. The paramedics closed the ambulance doors, and as they pulled away from the cabin, a distant howl echoed across the lake. Not a bear's sound, but a wolf's call, as if the entire forest was acknowledging the extraordinary events that had unfolded in their midst. Inside the speeding ambulance, little Avery squeezed her mother's hand and drifted back to sleep, safe and alive, because a wild mother had recognized a child in need and had not turned away. Far across the lake, in the darkness of the forest, the mother bear found a sheltered hollow where she and her cub could rest. Her fur was beginning to freeze in the cold air, but her massive body generated enough heat to warm them both. As her cub snuggled against her side, seeking the comfort and security of its mother's presence, the bear's thoughts, if bears can be said to have thoughts as humans understand them, were not on the strange events of the day or the humans she had encountered. Her world had momentarily expanded to include a small human cub in danger, but now it contracted again to what mattered most: her own offspring, their survival, their need for her protection. Yet something had changed, some boundary crossed that could not be uncrossed, and as night fell over Pine Hollow Lake, two mothers, one human, one bear, found themselves connected by an invisible thread of shared experience, a thread that would remain long after the ice melted and spring returned to the mountain valley. The fluorescent lights of Mountain View Regional Hospital cast harsh shadows across the waiting room, where Jacob sat with his head in his hands. Nearly 6 hours had passed since they'd arrived in the emergency room, Avery's tiny body pale and still on the stretcher. The doctors had immediately whisked her away, leaving Jacob and Lily with nothing but worry and paperwork. "Mr. Bennett?" Jacob looked up to see Dr. Haley Dawson standing in the doorway, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. He stood quickly, nearly knocking over his untouched coffee. "How is she? Can we see her?" The questions tumbled out before he could stop himself. Dr. Dawson's face softened. "She's stable. We've got her temperature back up to normal, and her lungs are clear, which is remarkable considering how long she was in that water." She gestured for Jacob to follow. Your wife is already with her. Avery's asking for her daddy." Relief washed over Jacob like a physical wave, making his knees weak. "She's awake? She's talking?" "She is," Dr. Dawson confirmed as they walked down the sterile hallway, "and she's been telling quite a story, something about a big fuzzy angel that pulled her from the lake." Jacob felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't an angel, it was a bear, a mother bear. She pulled Avery out of the water when none of us could reach her. Dr. Dawson stopped walking, turning to face him with unconcealed skepticism. "A bear rescued your daughter?" "I know how it sounds," Jacob admitted, "but there were witnesses. A wildlife ranger, our neighbor, even a biologist who studies these bears. The bear pulled Avery from the water and tried to revive her." Before Dr. Dawson could respond, a nurse hurried toward them from the direction of Avery's room, her expression concerned. "Doctor, we need you. The patient is becoming agitated." They rushed the remaining distance to find Avery sitting up in bed, her copper curls wild around her flushed face as she tried to remove the IV from her arm. Lily was attempting to calm her, but tears streamed down the little girl's cheeks. "Bear hurt," Avery cried when she saw her father. "Daddy, the bear hurt. We have to help." Jacob moved quickly to his daughter's side, gently restraining her hands. "Shh, sweetie, it's okay. The bear is fine. Remember? We helped her get out of the water, too." "No." Avery shook her head forcefully, her eyes wide with a certainty that startled everyone present. "She's hurt now. I saw it." Dr. Dawson stepped in, checking Avery's vital signs with practiced efficiency. Her heart rate's elevated, but that could just be the distress. "What do you mean you saw it, honey?" Lily asked gently, smoothing Avery's hair back from her forehead. "Did you have a bad dream?" Avery's lower lip trembled. "Not a dream. I saw the bear and her baby. Men with guns are chasing them." Jacob and Lily exchanged worried glances. How could Avery know about the bear cub? They hadn't mentioned that detail to her. "When did you see this?" Jacob asked, keeping his voice calm despite the chill that ran down his spine. "Just now," Avery insisted. "When I was sleeping, the bear talked to me." Dr. Dawson made a notation on Avery's chart. "It's not uncommon for children to have vivid dreams after trauma," she explained in a low voice to the parents. "Especially when hypothermia is involved. The brain creates narratives to process the experience." But something about Avery's certainty nagged at Jacob. But she wasn't a child prone to flights of fancy or dramatic exaggerations. And the detail about the cub, how would she know that? His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Michael Hayes's voice could be heard, arguing with hospital security. "I need to speak with the Bennett family immediately," he was saying. "It's regarding the incident at the lake." Jacob stepped into the hallway, surprised to see not only Michael but also Savannah Reed, and, more unexpectedly, Ethan Marshall, the trapper. All three looked grim. "They're going after the bear," Michael said without preamble. "State wildlife officials got wind of a bear interacting with a child, and they've dispatched a removal team. Standard protocol when a wild predator has close contact with humans, especially children." "Removal?" Jacob repeated, his stomach sinking. "You mean they're going to kill her?" Savannah nodded, her expression pained. "Despite my attempts to explain the circumstances, they're classifying it as a potential problem bear. The fact that she approached a human child at all makes her a liability in their eyes." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Jacob's gaze. "I may have contributed to the problem. When I first reported seeing the bears weeks ago, I mentioned that the mother seemed unusually comfortable near the cabins." But she saved my daughter, Jacob protested, loud enough that a nurse at the nearby station looked up with a frown. He lowered his voice. Doesn't that count for anything? Not to the wildlife management team, I'm afraid, Michael replied. They operate on strict protocols, and those protocols say a bear that approaches humans is dangerous, regardless of the circumstances. Inside the room, Avery had grown more distressed, twisting in the hospital bed despite Lily's attempts to calm her. They're hurting her, she wailed. Make them stop, Daddy. Dr. Dawson, concerned by her patient's escalating state, prepared a mild sedative. This will help her rest, she assured Lily, who nodded tearfully. As the medication took effect, Avery's cries subsided to whimpers, but her small hand gripped Jacob's with surprising strength. Promise you'll help the bear, she murmured as her eyelids grew heavy. She has a baby, too. Jacob's resolve hardened as he watched his daughter drift into medicated sleep. He turned back to the group in the hallway. Where is this removal team now? They're assembling at the ranger station, Michael answered. Planning to head out at first light tomorrow. They've got tracking dogs and tranquilizer guns, but their orders are to eliminate the bear if there's any sign of aggression. And there will be, Savannah added grimly. She's a mother with a cub. She'll defend her young if she feels threatened. Jacob looked between the three visitors, an idea forming. Is there any chance we could relocate them? Get the bears far away from here before the removal team arrives? Ethan spoke up unexpectedly. I know these woods better than anyone. I've been tracking that bear family all winter. His weathered face showed the conflict within him. If anyone can find them tonight, it's me. It's illegal, Michael reminded them, though without much conviction. Interfering with a wildlife management operation could mean fines, even jail time. So is poaching, Ethan replied with a sideways glance at the ranger. But we both know I've been doing that for years, without getting caught. A tense silence filled the corridor as the ethical implications hung in the air. It was Savannah who finally broke it. I have tranquilizer equipment in my research gear, she said quietly. If we could sedate the bears, we could transport them to the North Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary. It's protected land, and the bears would be safe there. Jacob looked back at the hospital room, where his daughter now slept peacefully thanks to medical intervention. Intervention that might not have been possible if not for a wild mother's inexplicable act of compassion. I'm coming with you, he decided. I owe that bear my daughter's life. You should stay here, Michael argued. Your family needs you. But Lily had appeared in the doorway, having overheard the conversation. Go, she said firmly. Avery is stable now, and I'll stay with her. But Jacob, her voice caught slightly, be careful. I nearly lost our daughter today. I can't lose you too. Jacob embraced his wife, drawing strength from her resilience. I'll be back by morning, he promised. As they prepared to leave, Ethan pulled Jacob aside. There's something you should know, he said in a low voice. That bear, she's not just any bear. The locals up in the North Ridge call her the Guardian. There have been stories about her for years. Strange encounters where she's appeared when hikers were in trouble, led lost children back to trails. Jacob frowned. You're saying this has happened before? Nothing quite like what happened today, Ethan clarified. But enough odd stories that some of the old-timers leave offerings for her, honey, fish, that sort of thing. I always thought it was superstitious nonsense until today. Before Jacob could process this new information, Dr. Dawson approached, her professional demeanor softened by concern. Mr. Bennett, before you go, there's something unusual in Avery's test results I think you should know about. Is something wrong? Jacob asked, fear immediately resurfacing. Not wrong exactly, the doctor replied, but her blood work shows an anomaly. A compound we can't identify. It appears to be some kind of natural antifreeze. Antifreeze, Jacob repeated, confused. Some animals produce natural compounds that prevent their cells from freezing in extreme cold, Dr. Dawson explained. It's how certain species survive winter. But humans don't have this capability. Except somehow, Avery's bloodstream contains traces of such a compound. Could it have been something in the lake water? Jacob asked. Dr. Dawson shook her head. It appears to be biological in origin, almost as if... She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the implication of her own thoughts. As if what? Jacob pressed. As if it was transferred to her, the doctor finished. But that's scientifically impossible. Bodies don't exchange biological compounds through casual contact. A memory flashed through Jacob's mind. The bear nudging Avery repeatedly after pulling her from the water, almost as if the animal was trying to transfer something to her. I need to go, he said abruptly to Dr. Dawson. Please keep this between us for now, and take good care of my daughter. The doctor nodded, still perplexed by her findings but recognizing the gravity in Jacob's expression. Of course. Outside the hospital, the winter night had deepened, stars sharp as icicles in the black sky. Michael's ranger truck was waiting in the parking lot, engine running and headlights cutting through the darkness. I've called in sick for my night shift, Michael explained as they climbed in. Officially, I know nothing about any bears tonight. Savannah was already in the back seat, surrounded by equipment bags. I've got tranquilizers, tracking gear, and transport containers for the cub, she said. But moving the mother will be challenging. She must weigh at least 700 pounds. Ethan, sliding into the passenger seat, nodded grimly. And she'll be weakened from her time in the water. Hypothermia affects bears, too, especially if her fur hasn't fully dried. As they drove through the night toward Pine Hollow, Jacob shared what Dr. Dawson had told him about the strange compound in Avery's blood. Savannah listened with growing excitement. There are legends in many indigenous cultures about animals transferring healing properties to humans, she said. I've always considered them symbolic rather than literal. But what if... She trailed off, lost in scientific possibilities. First, we need to find this bear, Michael reminded them, turning the truck onto the Forest Service road that would take them back to the lake, before the removal team does. The return to Pine Hollow was eerie in the darkness. The lake that had been a scene of both tragedy and miracle earlier that day now lay silent under the starlight. The hole in the ice, a black wound on its silver surface. The trees around the shore stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. Ethan directed them to park at a discreet distance, then led the way into the forest, following a path only he could see. The bears will have sought shelter after the ice incident, he explained in a whisper. Somewhere dry and protected from the wind, but not too far given the mother's condition. For over an hour, they trekked through the snow-laden forest, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Savannah carried her tranquilizer rifle ready, while Michael kept his hand near his service weapon, a precaution none of them mentioned, but all understood might be necessary. It was Jacob who spotted the first sign, a patch of disturbed snow where something large had passed, partially melted ice crystals indicating body heat had recently affected the area. This way, Ethan confirmed, examining the trail with an expert eye. And not long ago. They followed the tracks deeper into the forest, into an area where the pines grew so dense that they created a natural canopy, protecting the ground below from the worst of the snow. Here, the underbrush was thicker, making progress slower and noisier than any of them liked. "Wait," Savannah whispered suddenly, raising her hand for them to stop. "Listen." Through the still night air came a sound that raised the hair on the back of Jacob's neck. A low, pained moan, followed by the anxious whimpering of a smaller animal. "That's them," Ethan confirmed. "But something's wrong. The mother's in distress." They moved forward with increased caution, eventually reaching the edge of a small clearing. In the center, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the trees, lay the mother bear. Her massive form was curled around her cub, but even from a distance they could see she was trembling violently. The cub paced around her, occasionally pawing at her face and whining. "She's in bad shape," Savannah assessed, adjusting her glasses to get a better look. "The cold water and exertion may have been too much." Jacob felt a stab of guilt. The bear was suffering because she had saved his daughter, a child not her own, from a species not her own. "What can we do?" he asked, looking between his companions for answers. Savannah set down her pack, pulling out various pieces of equipment. "I have antibiotics, emergency warming blankets, some rehydration solutions, but approaching her in this state is incredibly dangerous." "I'll go," Ethan said unexpectedly. "She knows my scent. I've been tracking her for months." "She knows you as a threat," Michael pointed out. Ethan shook his head. "I don't think so. I've observed her many times, and she's always been aware of me, but never aggressive. Almost like she was tolerating my presence." Before anyone could object further, Ethan began slowly moving into the clearing, his hands visible and his movements deliberate. The cub spotted him first, rising onto its hind legs with a startled huff. The mother bear's head lifted weakly, her dark eyes finding the human approaching her vulnerable family. "Easy, guardian," Ethan murmured, using the local name for the bear. "I'm not here to harm you, not this time." To the astonishment of the watching group, the mother bear did not display the expected aggression. Instead, she seemed to study Ethan, her intelligent gaze moving from his face to his empty hands and back again. "That's it," Ethan continued, now close enough that one swipe of her massive paw could end him. "You remember me, don't you? The human who's been watching you all winter." The bear's breathing was labored, and up close Ethan could see the problem. A patch of ice had formed on her fur where she hadn't been able to dry properly, pulling heat from her body. Additionally, there was a wound on her front paw, likely from the sharp ice when she was struggling to escape the lake. "Savannah," Ethan called softly, not taking his eyes off the bear. "I need the warming blankets and the antibiotic kit." Savannah carefully approached, the requested items in her hands. The cub growled at this new human, but remained close to its mother's side. "Amazing," Savannah whispered as they worked together to spread the emergency blanket over the bear's trembling form. "She's allowing this. It's completely unprecedented behavior." The mother bear watched them warily but made no move to attack. When Ethan began cleaning the wound on her paw, she huffed in pain but did not pull away. "It's like she knows we're trying to help," Jacob observed from where he stood with Michael at the edge of the clearing. "Or she's simply too weak to fight," Michael countered, though his voice held wonder rather than cynicism. As they worked to stabilize the bear's condition, a new sound cut through the night, the distant baying of dogs. Everyone froze, exchanging alarmed glances. "The removal team," Michael said grimly. "They must have decided not to wait until morning." "We need more time," Savannah insisted, administering an injection of antibiotics into the bear's massive shoulder. "She's not ready to be moved, and tranquilizing her in this condition could kill her." Jacob made a quick decision. "Michael and I will head them off, buy you some time." He turned to the ranger. "Will you help?" Michael hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Against my better judgment and probably my job security. Let's go." As they hurried back through the forest toward the sound of the approaching dogs, Michael outlined a plan. "There's an old trapper's cabin about half a mile east of here. We can tell them we spotted the bears heading that way. It should divert them long enough for Savannah and Ethan to stabilize the mother." "And then what?" Jacob asked, ducking under a low-hanging branch heavy with snow. "We can't keep this up all night." "One problem at a time," Michael replied grimly. They reached the main trail just as the removal team came into view, 4 men with rifles, accompanied by 3 tracking dogs straining at their leashes. Jacob recognized the lead official as Logan Carter, the regional wildlife management director known for his by-the-book approach. "Hayes?" Logan called in surprise as he spotted Michael. "Thought you were out sick. And who's this?" "Jacob Bennett," Michael replied smoothly. "His daughter was involved in the incident with the bear earlier today. We're out here because we spotted the bears heading toward the old Sullivan cabin about 20 minutes ago." Logan's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you be out tracking a dangerous animal with a civilian, Hayes? Especially at night?" "Mr. Bennett insisted on joining the search," Michael improvised. "His daughter is in the hospital because of these bears, and he wanted to be present when they were dealt with." Jacob nodded, trying to appear appropriately vengeful. "That animal put my little girl in the hospital. I want to see it handled properly." Logan studied them both before apparently accepting the explanation. "Well, you should both clear out now. This is an official operation and civilians aren't permitted." "Of course," Michael agreed, "but you might want to head east. Like I said, we spotted them near the Sullivan place." "My team will determine the best approach," Logan replied stiffly. He turned to his men. "Jenkins, escort these 2 back to their vehicle. The rest of you, continue on the current trail. The dogs have a scent." Jacob and Michael exchanged alarmed looks. The dogs would lead the team directly to where Savannah and Ethan were treating the injured bear. "Sir," Jacob tried again, "I really think you should check the cabin area first. My daughter's safety." "Is no longer at risk, Mr. Bennett," Logan cut him off. "These bears will be dealt with according to protocol. Now, please, leave this to the professionals." As one of the wildlife officers moved to escort them back, Michael made a subtle gesture to Jacob, tilting his head slightly toward the dense undergrowth to their right. Jacob understood immediately. They needed to create a diversion. "Actually," Jacob said loudly, "I think I dropped my phone back there when we spotted the bears. Mind if I go look for it quickly?" Before anyone could object, he plunged into the underbrush, deliberately making as much noise as possible while moving in a direction that would lead the dogs away from where the bears were actually located. Behind him, he could hear Michael making apologies and the wildlife officer cursing as he followed Jacob into the tangled brush. The plan worked too well. The dogs, excited by the sudden movement and noise, lunged in Jacob's direction, dragging their handlers with them. Within moments, the entire removal team was crashing through the forest after him. Jacob ran as fast as the challenging terrain would allow, grateful for his lifelong familiarity with these woods. He knew exactly where he was leading them, toward a series of rocky outcroppings where scent would be difficult to track, and the dogs would likely lose any trail. Behind him, he could hear Logan shouting for him to stop, the dogs barking frantically, and Michael calling out apologetic explanations about civilian inexperience. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Jacob felt a surge of satisfaction. Every minute the removal team spent chasing him was another minute Savannah and Ethan had to help the bear that had saved his daughter. After nearly 15 minutes of this improvised chase, Jacob allowed himself to be caught in a small clearing, bent over and gasping for breath, as if he'd simply run out of stamina rather than led them on a deliberate diversion. "What the hell was that?" Logan demanded, his face flushed with exertion and anger. "You interfered with an official wildlife operation." "I'm sorry," Jacob panted, feigning embarrassment. "I panicked when I thought about losing my phone. All the pictures of my daughter are on it." He patted his pocket. "Found it, though. Must have been in my jacket the whole time." Logan looked like he might arrest Jacob on the spot, but Michael stepped in smoothly. "Cut him some slack, Logan. His kid nearly died today. He's not thinking straight." The wildlife director scowled but nodded curtly. "Get him out of here, Hayes. And stay out of our way." "Gladly," Michael replied, leading Jacob away while the removal team regrouped, the dogs now confused by the multiple scent trails crisscrossing the area. Once they were out of earshot, Michael spoke in an urgent whisper. "That bought us maybe 30 minutes before they get the dogs back on track. We need to warn Savannah and Ethan." They hurried back toward the clearing where they'd left their companions, taking a circuitous route to avoid leaving an obvious trail. When they arrived, they found a scene that stopped them in their tracks. The mother bear was on her feet, the emergency blanket still draped over her massive shoulders like a bizarre cape. Savannah stood nearby, her tranquilizer rifle lowered, watching in amazement as Ethan knelt beside the bear, applying some kind of salve to her injured paw. "What the—" Michael began, but Savannah quickly shushed him. "Don't startle them," she whispered. "I've never seen anything like this." She's allowing treatment as if she understands we're helping. The bear's eyes, deep wells of intelligence, moved to Jacob as he approached cautiously. There was recognition there, he was certain of it.